The Industrial Revolution built India. The Green Revolution fed India. But the Digital Revolution will transform India. E-healthcare, e-education, e-governance. Internet to every doorstep, mobile in every hand, and IT jobs for young and aspiring Indians.
This fondness for technology is what Indians need. And Digital India is basically an enabling platform for change. As the Prime Minister rightly stated, IT plus IT is equal to IT. India's talent plus information technology is equal to India tomorrow.
An information communication technology forum that aims to crowdsource and curate focus suggestions from the industry to implement the visionary Digital India program.
It is about taking government services, taking high-speed internet to the farthest corners of this country, and making sure, therefore, that you eliminate the bureaucracy, you eliminate red tape, you make government and public utilities available to 1.2 billion people, at least in a position that they are able to access it.
We need expansive, quality, low-cost connectivity. Recently, the US raised its standard for broadband to 25 megabits per second. India's standard is 2% of that level today, and has less than 15% of its country fully connected. This government has laid very strong goals of providing this connectivity.
The focused areas of discussion in this forum are broadband highways, universal access to mobile connectivity, public internet access program, net neutrality, digital wallet, e-governance, e-Kranti, information for all, electronics manufacturing, IT for jobs, and early harvest program. With bits and bytes of a billion dreams, let us embark on this digital journey.
The Times Television Network welcomes all of you to the Digital India Summit 2015. Now, newspapers have been abuzz with the Prime Minister's very ambitious dream of transforming India into a connected knowledge economy where every citizen would also be an empowered netizen. But the question remains, what will it take, really, to convert the Prime Minister's digital dream into recognizable reality? We will now start with the first panel discussion of the day that's titled Digital India Bits and Bytes of a Billion Dreams. For that, I would now like to invite on stage the panelists, Vineet Nair, former CEO HCL Technologies and presently founder of Sampark Foundation. Dr. Anand Agarwal, CEO Sterlite Technologies. Sanjay Kapoor, Chairman Micromax. Dr. Jerome Booth, Chairman New Call Telecom. Ravi Venkatesan, Chairman Social Venture Partners India. And Satyan Gajwani, CEO Times Internet Limited. To moderate this session, I'd like to request R. Sridharan, Managing Editor, ETNOW, to please come on stage.
Thank you, Tina. And Mr. Minister, may I request you to join us on the stage, please, for this panel. I'm sure there are some skeptics in this room who will probably ask, this is a country which often takes 3 years to build a simple traffic flyover in most of our cities. Now, how is the government going to execute an ambitious project like this, 2.5 lakh villages, broadband, and 7 lakh kilometers of cable laying to be done? And that's just one small part of it. We're talking about digitally empowering Indians, putting government services on demand, online. So can you please walk us through what is the execution plan as far as the government is concerned?
Indians can deliver if they are made to deliver, if they are inspired to deliver. That's how we work. As I always said, this 90 crore mobile phone in India, 300 million internet, 30 crore internet, in many cases happened in spite of government. In many cases, roadblocks by government.
Right.
I think with Arnab Goswami, my good friend on Times Now, I have discussed telephony and the legacy of telephony a number of times, okay? But in spite of that, mobile grew in India. That is India. If this can happen without the government, in spite of the government, if government is willing to walk the extra mile, I think it can be done. Right. I met all the chief ministers. I caught a meeting of all the IT secretaries and IT ministers. The right of way was a problem. Now 90% of the states have agreed we need to give right of way.
So since you said that you welcome feedback from industry, I'm going to do just that. I'm going to invite my panelists to, in 2 minutes each, please make specific recommendations from your respective industries that you would want the government to implement or look at. So let me start with Anand.
Current issues which were there in terms of execution are being corrected right now. We have that scale, we have that capability of speed, and we have the necessary skills for the execution. Right. Once the right-of-way issues have been are being resolved right now currently, and the fact that the turnkey execution, I'm told right now, is being strongly envisaged. So our only suggestion to the minister would be that please make the project in a turnkey format, break the country into several zones, and deliver it and ask expectations in terms of service level deliveries, and the industry will come and deliver it.
Vineet, are there any milestones that the government should be looking at as it goes about implementing Digital India?
So I think I must compliment the government on a grand vision. If you intelligently use the satellite communication to reach it, the basis on which National Stock Exchange was formed, you can actually reach all the Gram Panchayat in 90 days' time at a cost of 1 lakh, including the solar panels and including the computers. So why wait for 3 years? And is investment in broadband to the villages at this juncture the most critical task which the government needs to do, where you can get faster return? The second is there is a huge amount of output or results you will get out of information dissemination. So if you set up good call centers and good technologies where you will be able to disseminate information on crop patterns, on education patterns, on commodity pricing, on people who are registered on mobile or who are registered on those kiosks which are run by private individuals in those Gram Panchayats, you would suddenly have the government to citizen information gap suddenly collapse.
Satyan, I know that you are passionate about net neutrality, so what would you say to the minister on that?
I think one of the things that we've seen happen around the world is that governments have done a great job laying the infrastructure, and entrepreneurs have done a great job building on top of it. You know, one of the beautiful things about the internet industry is that, whether for right or for wrong, the way the whole investment attitude comes is if you solve a need, there is more than enough funding to see that through. And I think we should just make sure we enable that sort of laissez-faire approach to services, because that will deliver the results that we want.
Okay. So, Sanjay, zero imports, electronic imports by 2019. What about you?
90% of world's produce comes from one country, and I think everybody is risking too much into putting all their eggs in one basket. India happens to be a natural alternative choice with such a humongous domestic demand. I think my ask to make and bring in parity on Make in India would be benchmark all practices with China, which does it so well on this one. Right? Make sure that we don't lose out on any commercials vis-a-vis them. So I think that's what I would ask for.
Right, okay. Now, Jerome, you run a fairly big ISP back in the UK, and you acquiring companies in India. So what are the challenges you're facing as a foreign investor that you want to bring to the minister's attention?
I've invested in many countries all over the world in emerging markets, and it's often the case that there's this tension between, domestic and foreign. Foreign investors are sometimes seen, as warily. And I think the best foreign investment, of course, is long-term, committed foreign investment. For me, this is a huge opportunity. And I believe in Made in India as well. We're creating a little Silicon Valley here in Delhi. And for me, it's about commitment. And if I'm successful in helping, in particular, getting broadband out to villages, which is what I see as my goal, then I think we can also help attract many other investors.
Ravi, from you, I know that you and your partner are working on something very interesting, Mr. Minister, which is
jobs and skills.
Yeah. Even for people who are illiterate. So, Ravi, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, Minister. So I want to focus on jobs because that's the burning issue. And, of course, your vision of skilling people and placing them in rural BPOs is very commendable. But I argue there's one risk, and which is the risk that half the low-end jobs in the IT sector, including BPOs, may not exist in 3 to 5 years because of automation. Software will replace people. We need to prepare people not for jobs as we know it, but to become internet entrepreneurs. So I think that is the transformation that I would love to see.
When we say make in India, it is equally available to foreign companies. Come establish a base in India, manufacture in India, manufacture for India, and also export outside. Okay. Use the enormous talent of Indian human resource. And for that, you will be treated as an Indian company, entitled to all the benefits of an Indian company, and also entitled to all the benefit of exports for an Indian company. China is an issue, but I think India, the sheer talent of India would propel us enormously if the enabling platform is created, what we are doing. The second part, on the skill part, I agree with you. But our take is that in spite of automation, a lot of employment potential will exist in manufacturing. The hand will be needed. On the third issue, what you said was satellite use. As I always say, in India, the satellites will exist with Jugaad technology. That is India. And what is important for the government is to blend the two. Therefore, wherever it is possible, digging will be done, the cable will be laid. Where it is possible, if we can supplement by satellite or balloons or drones, we can consider that. We have to reach every Gram Panchayat, and therefore I'm quite open to tweak the technology of the program if you can come with the concrete suggestions, and our technical team can supplement that. I would appeal to all of you present here, if you can think on those lines where we can work together, because now technology is being accepted. Can we bring it to the last mile, the most disempowered, the Dalit woman sitting on the remotest margin of development? That is my concept. Thank you.
It's a great project, it's a great plan. But Anand, I'm going to come back to the whole question of how do you wire up a country that's so complicated? When you're dealing with state governments, you're talking about 7 lakh kilometers to be laid. At the ground level, what are the challenges you're facing, and how do you see this panning out, let's say, over the next 4 or 5 years?
The issues that have been till date were more in terms of creating the right framework. I think those challenges are, the execution has not really started. The execution was not a problem. The problem was getting the state governments aligned, making sure the private sector is fully aligned to the program, and then bidding it out. So I think all that's currently happening as we speak. And while the challenge is big, but it's not unsurmountable. And it's a great vision of connecting 250,000 panchayats. And it will require a degree, what Arnab said, of passion, experience, and patience.
Right. No, Sanjay, you've been the CEO of India's largest telecom company. Now, we know that just laying a fiber isn't good enough. Something needs to ride on it. So how do you see that challenge being met?
When I look at this whole digital India, the real challenge is around the 3 verticals that I spoke about, which is access, which is storage, and which is analytics. Without access being formulated, everything else is a pipe dream. Right? And access comes in 2 forms in a country like us. One, what my friend said about the fiber. And no matter which part of the world you go to, when wireless went up, wired went up at probably a faster pace.
I see.
And India has a problem with that, to say, how do you wire such a large country? How do you wire that so quickly? Because whatever wire we talk about in the country that was laid 15 years earlier is either obsolete or ending life almost, because that's the life. So I think all of us are sitting on a tangent where unless and until access is addressed going forward, we are going to be in a limbo on this digital India.
I think there's really 2 problems we're trying to solve here. And it sounds like if you just hear what everybody's talking about, first is create the connectivity. Once you have the connectivity, I think it's a challenge from saying what do consumers want and what do they need. Right? So we know what they want, and that's where the entrepreneurial ecosystem is very innovative in figuring out the next cool things that'll be interesting and that'll add value from that perspective. I agree that when we think about what do we need, I think there is a need to digitize a lot of things that are very analog today. And I think I believe the entrepreneurial ecosystem can really fill 90% of that void. But when it comes to interfacing with government, it's fundamentally a government's choice to do it. And I think the government here does have the intention.
Jerome, you are someone who watches India from a distance, and you're actually putting your money here when you have the option of picking other countries as well, other emerging markets. So what do you think will work really for this country, and what sort of a promise do you see coming from this whole Digital India initiative?
For me, content is massively important, and we've mentioned a little bit about that. But so is affordability. But I mean, we need also, I think, to really look at public space Wi-Fi, because for a lot of people, you can use, a lower grade mobile, and you can get access. People who are really not going to get access otherwise. What I'd be looking for is a country which has huge long-term potential, an undervalued exchange rate, a very clear sense of very strong institutions. And for me, India, has now reached that point where it's going to develop very strongly.
Ravi, one of the things that, intrigues me as I look at our Digital India plan is that here we are trying to make people digitally literate and empower them digitally at a time when 2/3 of your adult population is actually illiterate. So what sort of challenges is this going to pose for any entrepreneur or any company that's trying to do or exploit the Digital India potential?
Yeah, I go back to the issue of jobs, okay, because that's really the starting point for my response. The idea of training people and preparing them for jobs is very sort of old world, if you know what I mean. And also the idea of digital literacy has to change. I think the new paradigm has to be around mobile applications. Okay, and it takes skill, but you don't need a whole lot of literacy in order to use a mobile app. So to me, the big idea is, can we empower people to become entrepreneurs? Mm-hmm. And the way you make them in entrepreneurs is teach them how to build simple mobile and web apps, and then they can spot local opportunities and build an app for that, or build a small internet business.
I want to add one important point to what Ravi is saying. If jobs is the big concern for which Make in India is the answer, we need to step back and think about what is Make in India. We are moving away from make to do something with the information you have. So therefore, when you have to teach new skills to Indians, right? The new skills to India is not just about digital literacy, it is also about the ability to do something with the information which is going to be available, which is significantly higher complex task than creating BPO jobs and others. BPO jobs will help in the short term, but in the long term, if you want to create a competitive advantage, you will have to leapfrog your thinking on the next generation of skills, and that would be about ability to take the information and convert that into a business enterprise.
A lot of the experts on the panel today are telling us that mobile is probably going to be the center of our internet and digital revolution. We talk about 300 million internet users in the country, but if you talk about the user experience, I'm on 3G, but it still feels like 2G to me. So what is the problem? Is it spectrum? Is it bandwidth? I mean, what is the problem and how are we going to solve that?
The fact is that all the networks built in India were built around voice. They were not built around data. And the reality of voice is that 80% of the voice used to get consumed outdoors and 20% used to get consumed indoors. With data, it's absolutely the reverse. 80% gets used indoors and 20% gets used outdoors. But the entire layout of the networks in the country actually fire from outside in building and are unable to cover that in building problem, and therefore the networks have to redo themselves to actually get into indoors rather than outdoors. If you go to Singapore, if you go to Hong Kong, if you go to other developed countries of the world, do you see towers? You never get to see towers because everything has moved through small cells, in-building solutions, indoors, and therefore the data speeds that you get are very different. So the challenge is that given the current policy structure, given the current issues in our country, it seems we are not going to come out of this web in a hurry. Indian operators are not going to get 30, 40, 50 megs of spectrum. And even if they're going to get 30, 50, 40 megs of spectrum at $2 billion or $3 billion for every 5 megs, where is there a business case? So I think that throws a challenge to everybody sitting here as well to say, can we now start innovating a bit differently from the rest of the world? The video will work in India, but video will not work at 2 GB speed. It will work probably at 256. Can we compress it? Can we come out with innovations? And I think there's a lot of innovation that will happen around here.
Right. So Anand, does it put you in a lucky spot where fiber will probably be what lights up our homes in terms of high-speed bandwidth?
It needs to be. See, the first vision statement of Digital India is infrastructure as a utility, high-speed internet as a utility. Exactly like you have a power grid or a national highway, set up a fiber grid, and then let the services roll on it. It's proven beyond doubt right now that on a voice road, you need to make data runways. Those data runways will nothing be but fiber. As soon as we start thinking of it as a utility and not a technology, the solutions will come out.
And so what I'm going to do is ask my panelists to tell me 3 things each that you think are very critical for Digital India to really succeed. Let me start with Vineet.
Digital India is less to do with the hardware, more to do with the software. The world has moved on. So my recommendation is software, focus on coding, focus on digital the way it is, focus on information. And let information be available for people to build businesses on top of it, and that will create jobs.
Right. Satyan?
I think one point which I mentioned earlier, but I do think it's important, is that when we do have this access, it needs to be a neutral access. One of the concerns that we see today is that if you have 2 services and one of them is offered with free data or with faster speed or whatever it may be, you are reducing that sort of competitive, fair environment that spurs innovation. And I think in a market where you have constrained bandwidth, there's a lot of risk that that kind of situation can show up. And I think it's a critical thing that we make sure we enable that local entrepreneur to have as much of a chance to compete as that big internet company based in Delhi.
Sanjay, your 3 points?
Yeah, I think I wouldn't mince words to say access stands number 1 on my list. Without that, everything else is utopian. Second, I think clearly public-private partnerships. I don't believe that this can be rolled out by government agencies on their own. And finally, I think we need a very robust payment platform at the end of the day. We are a country with very limited credit cards. And if you don't have plastic all over and people are still struggling with bank accounts, I think you need a mechanism by which electronically people can actually pay for what they transact. And I think that is still very fragmented.
Anand?
Broadband needs to be defined as a utility. And second, I think it needs to be enablement of low-cost devices, whether it is done by importing or manufacturing or by sheer volumes.
Right. Jerome?
My first point is, having locally designed content, which is really applicable, as opposed to some sort of imported. So content, I think, is very important. Secondly, government which enables transparency and competition more than sort of planning. And most important of all, my third point, is really, in order to get the digital Dalit, to have use of affordable access, given what we've got. And that must mean public space Wi-Fi.
Okay. Ravi?
Well, if it's not obvious already, I'd say Code for India.
Okay.
Number 2 would be access, and number 3 would be mandatory government services.
Right. And on that note, let me thank my panelists. I think each one of you has been wonderful. You really added tremendously to this session. And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, let's give them a big round of applause, please.